Dan, you prick. Back again. Hey, Dan's Nightmare, they call it. Dan's Night Terrors, the podcast. New Zealand's 187th favourite podcast. There's only 189 podcasts in New Zealand.
I haven't checked
the
charts.
We thrashed those other two.
I haven't checked the charts for ages, but I'm presuming we're still behind Ben Shapiro and fucking, I don't know who else.
We're judging by the state of the fucking country.
It's all going to shit. So, what you could do... Oh, Dom's having a deck now that this is all over. For the listeners, Dom's wearing a Led Zeppelin, cut-off T-shirt, so it's cut off into a tank top, and he's just smoking some deck and relaxing on the couch.
This T-shirt's caused a lot of problems, actually.
Really?
Well, I don't like Led Zeppelin. And so you get in these situations of people where they want to talk to you about Led Zeppelin. You say you don't like Led Zeppelin, but people that do like Led Zeppelin, they really like Led Zeppelin. And so, madness ensues.
I'd kind of presume that you didn't. I know you, so I have a good reason to believe you.
It's actually a prop from a short film that we made, but it's a really good T-shirt.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if you can see that. It was quite a good cut.
Yeah, it does look. It looks really nice on you. And I mean,
fuck, I smell terrible as well.
Do you ever wear that down Whammy Bar, your Led Zeppelin tee?
I haven't been to Whammy Bar for a while.
How are you, Dan? You living large?
Yep, large.
Someone took Dan's phone off him in the street today. Just stole it off him.
Put their COVID-y fingers all over it.
Yeah, rubbed their hands in his face and took his phone. I wonder if it was one of Ricardo's heavies they sent because you fucking stood him up with your fake job.
Probably. I've seen he's rolling pretty deep out there in Onehunga.
Yeah.
He did have a D&D T-shirt.
Poor Dan.
This episode 20, we made it this far. That's 5 fucking months. Perhaps we thought it would all be...
Jesus Christ, it's 5 months.
Yeah, perhaps we all thought it'd be all over by now, but here we are.
Things just keep getting worse, don't they?
Yeah. I don't know if the listeners have noticed, but there's 76 of you or something who are supporting this podcast. And there's, everyone that's listening supporting in their own way, I guess. But
no, they're fucking not. They're malingerers.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed that we're not trying to sell you tooth whitener or state-of-the-art jock strap? It's because
we could actually do that. The thing that we're signed up to, which pushes the podcast out, they keep asking us to put ads on. So we could. Yeah. So you'd be listening to this and be like, hold on a sec, time for a break.
Yeah.
And then,
It's nothing worse. Have you tried to listen to any of those?
Fucking end up with dog worming fucking ads.
Have you listened to the iHeartRadio podcast? They have ads break several times in an episode.
Fucking drives you nuts.
It's
so do you people want that? Is that what you want from your life?
That's what you're pushing us towards.
Yeah. If we don't get 100 people signing up to Patreon at some arbitrary date, then we'll keep threatening to do this, but not actually do it.
Do you want to make a solid date? Well, I guess if we're going to follow through on, not going to follow through on the threat, then there's no point in having a solid date, is there?
Fuck, the listeners know us well enough by now. They knew if we had any opportunity to sell out, we would have taken it.
Yeah. Hey, my favourite news story of the day was...
Do you want a beat for this?
Sure. Some kid had a piece of Lego that was stuck in his nose for 2 years come out. That was in the New Zealand news, I believe.
He had a bit of Lego in his nose for 2 years.
Yeah, pretty good. Oh, my other favourite bit of news today was there's this MMA fighter from Melbourne who
I saw that.
He fought in the UFC and he challenged the Premier Dan Andrews to a fight over the lockdown today. Oh my god!
Australia is amazing.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet place, they say.
Yeah, well, I remember when because I guess for the listeners that don't know, I moved back and forth between New Zealand and Australia about 5 times because I'd go to Australia and then I'd get fat and depressed and not ride anything. I'd come back to New Zealand and I'd be starving and get pleurisy and then I'd come back to Australia. But anyway, I mean, one time moving back and I'm really going to make a go of it in Australia this time. I'm sure it's going to be fine. And it was my second day there and I got to the tram stop and then this big, huge, fat bogan came up to me and pushed me and was like, you got too many fucking tattoos, mate. And I was just like, why am I here?
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's such
You
a
know?
fucking Australian thing to happen, man.
And he had tattoos too. It's not like he
Yeah.
didn't have any fucking tattoos.
Yeah. Just people are so fucking obnoxious here. Like,
What about when that woman spat on it, me and you and JJ in the mall in Brisbane? Oh, we're not Brisbane. What's the other place? Adelaide.
huh?
Remember that? When we were in Adelaide for Christmas and we were walking through the mall and that woman spat on us and then you tried to fight her husband.
Spat on us.
You don't
This-
remember that?
This is a real thing that happened.
We were walking through the mall and this woman goes, "You're disgusting," and then spat on us. And then you tried to fight her husband, who obviously didn't want to have anything to do with the whole situation.
Kind of rings a bell. Dan, can you verify this?
Ask JJ, he'll remember. JJ was really upset. He's like, "Todd, no, calm down."
Fuck, I'll fight anyone in the mall.
Especially at
Like,
that time. That was like peak Todd fighting someone at the mall.
Yeah. The mall's...
That-
Not many people know, but the mall's probably one of the best places to fight someone.
How's that?
I don't know, it's just public. You can make a real example of them. I think people expect it less, you know?
Yeah.
So if you attack someone in the mall, they're not anticipating a physical attack. Whereas in like a club or something, people were a bit more expectant of physical violence. But in the mall, people think they can just mouth off and nothing.
But you showed that woman's husband.
Nothing's gonna.
Do you think when he left the house that day to go to the mall and get like an iced coffee that he thought there'd be an altercation with tattooed New Zealander?
No, probably not. You know, he's probably just there to fucking hit up the reject store.
The Not Quite Right store.
Yeah.
Do you know San bought a chicken from the Not Quite Right store one time?
What? Oh,
San bought a chicken, like a roast chicken from the Not Quite Right store.
I thought you meant a live chicken, but
Nah, that'll be all right. But
Yeah,
yeah, a roast one. And I was like, dude, you don't want to eat that, man. Like, it's all right if you want to get some like socks from there, but you don't want to get a fucking roast chicken from the $2 shop.
yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's better than getting socks from there. Socks from the Not Quite Right store probably make your shoes smell like after one wear.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Poultry is fucking Not Quite Right. Poultry is a dangerous game to play, as Dan will tell you.
Hey, the election's been pushed back.
Yep.
How you guys feeling about that? All good? More time for Dan to get in there and do some sound for the Greens?
Fucking more time for Dan to enroll to vote because he's not even enrolled yet.
Really?
No. He's been fucking going on Facebook saying, I'm not enrolled.
Atrocious.
And I don't know if I'm going to. Don't know if I'm going to vote. He's
Hey,
one of those
if-
people that thinks that voting is encouraging them.
Yeah.
More truths.
If you know any 17-year-olds who are about to turn 18 in that
Tell
time,
them to enroll.
yeah, get
Them
them
to get in there. Change the
Sure.
country.
We-
What if they got conservative values? Though maybe tell those ones not so much.
Yeah, tell them tell
The
people.
conservative ones, you can get them to fill out a fake form. This doesn't really go into the, just be like a Google form.
Imagine being a 17-year-old with conservative politics.
Fuck, there's heaps of them.
Yeah, I know, but it's still surprising.
I don't
Like,
know, man. People just know what they know, and if your parents are rich, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I used
Should
to
we-
work when I worked in Fatima's for minimum wage in this cafe.
You're fucking chatty tonight. You're usually trying to hurry the intro up.
Well, I got to go to the toilet, so now I'm
Oh yeah,
back in there.
please
Oh
continue.
no, we can wind it up if you want.
No, I want to hear the
Don't you hear my
Fatima's.
amusing anecdote?
I want to hear
Well,
the.
so we're all working in this cafe for fucking minimum wage. I mean, as far as shitty jobs goes, it was pretty good, but it's still a shit job. And there was this one young girl there who was, I don't even think she was 18. And she was like, all like national and all this fucking shit. And I was like, motherfucker, like, you're earning the least amount of money that you can earn legally to do this, like, the fuck, anyway.
to clean out the deep fryer.
No, she didn't have to clean up the deep fryer. That was like,
Your job.
that was my job. Yeah. Is anyone who's listening who hasn't cleaned out a deep fryer, it's not all it's cracked up to be. I tell you that much.
And you'll never want to eat anything out of a deep fryer ever again.
Nah,
See that. You ever
Dan
clean-
can take. Dan must have cleaned a deep fryer in his time.
Surely.
Mini.
Heaps.
Yeah.
you
Every
work in a-
cooking job I've ever had, you got to clean the deep fryer. It's generally me.
Can you not just tell them to get fucked?
That's not how it works.
Oh, anyway, is that us?
That's what Sean did. His first ever job, he got a job at New World, and his first task he was assigned was to clean the bathroom out, and he just like walked out of there. That's a man with dignity right there.
Yeah, look at him now. He's fucking richer than all of us.
Picture him walking out of there too.
Oh, hell yeah. I don't think he got another job for like another 15 years. His second job was like in his 30s.
In the mines.
Big Save Furniture.
Oh, shit,
I remember walking out of a job one time and being like, fuck you, and kicking shit over and throwing my apron down and walking out. And the further I got from there, just the more I realised how much I needed that job. And that also all my shit was still back there. And had to do like a cartoon, like U-turn, and then come back and get my stuff and walk in and then walk back out again. And like,
Have I ever told you the story about the last time I got released from prison and I was like getting walked out of the yard and I gave everyone the fingers? And I was like, better not come back here.
What about when we were catching that plane to go play in Wellington or whatever, and it was a real bad landing, and then we're getting off, and Todd gave the fucking pilot the fingers.
Yeah, I was pissed.
And he looked so shocked, like.
I was pissed off, man. I guess it wasn't really his fault though. Now I look at it.
I was like, what are you doing? Giving the pilot the fingers.
I was angry.
Fair enough. All right, fuck, we should start. This is one of our best episodes, and we're wasting everyone's attention on this shit.
Yeah, if you're still listening, keep listening, because...
this is a really good episode.
There's nothing like this intro.
Don't play the music, Dan. Welcome back. A little bit older, a little bit uglier.
We couldn't get another producer, so Dan's back as well.
Look at this, Dan.
We can divulge all this now.
This is what Todd's been itching to get into.
I don't necessarily like him, but I respected him.
Well, everyone needs jewelry.
He's a maniac.
Further to him crippled.
This is an audio podcast, Dom.
Sure. What do you think, Dan?
I'll do an introduction first, Tina, which I prepared earlier.
He loves introductions.
Well, we're actually terrible at them, so... Today's guest is Tina Ngata. She is an environmental indigenous rights advocate, a writer, journalist, and is leading the charge in exempling a compassionate approach to dealing with people whose rightful distrust in institutions has made them vulnerable to harmful conspiracy. How's that?
Sounds good. Yep. Sounds about right.
Excellent.
That was a good intro for you, Todd.
Yeah, thank you. It's one of the better ones I've done. I actually put some effort in and read your bio on the spin-off. Oh, is it the spin-off?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been busy of late with everything going on. I came across Money Dunlop from Radio New Zealand showed me your article, and it was... obviously, I was in the thick of it with just, I don't know, talking to lots of people who believe in a lot of these conspiracies at the moment.
You've been going in lately, haven't you, Todd?
Yeah, and I was finding it difficult. And I read your article, and I thought it provided some perspective that was pretty valuable at this time.
Thanks. Oh, yeah. I'm glad it worked for you. And it's been really well received. Well, not roundly well received. Some people have taken exception to it, but it's had some. It's meant a lot to quite a few whānau, and I've had some more than. And I write quite often, but I'd say some of the responses that I've had have been quite profound. A lot of people who, it made me really understand closely how deeply people are being affected. I'm kind of shifting more towards the term rabbit hole logic than conspiracy theories, because it just doesn't always sit comfortably with me to say that all conspiracies are fake.
Yeah, sure.
There are some valid there are people who conspire. There are powers that conspire. And so I think both it doesn't do justice to some of the issues that should be challenged and railed against, but also it can leave yourself a little bit vulnerable If it comes across that you're suggesting that there isn't any such thing as conspiracy at all. So I'm kind of leaning more towards the term rabbit hole logic to kind of describe that space where you start off talking about COVID and you wind up talking about subterranean humanoid species and flat Earth, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a really important point too, because I think if you do approach it from that angle, or then people you're trying to engage or trying to like engage with some facts or truth, immediately, if you're coming from that, you're a conspiracy theorist angle, you're not acknowledging that your own distrust of power and capital and those institutions that do conspire against the people. Like, we are left without heaps of agency and power over our own lives, and where I think a lot of this stuff comes from. So I think acknowledging that commonality is a good starting point.
Yeah, totally. And it's less. It's also less patronizing. And I think as soon as people start to feel patronized, then they tend to dig their heels in, and they don't feel that you're going to understand them anyway. So they just, it just winds up not becoming a very productive space.
It's hard sometimes, though, not to be,
Challenging. It's real challenging, especially when some of the ideas seem so far removed from reality. But we had this experience the other day we were at a hui at the marae, and the council had asked us to talk about the Endeavour memorials. It's a related issue. I'll draw the connection in a second, but they had asked us to consult with them about the Endeavour memorials, and our choices were really for them to tell us like where it was that we wanted, but they never asked the community if we wanted them in the first place. We were only ever given the choice of where we wanted to put them. And we were forced to participate in that process. And what we knew would happen, the whole reason that it did happen, is because if we didn't participate in the process, our silence would be taken as complicity, and it would be written up that we approve of them going somewhere. So we had to participate in a process that for us was a breach of the treaty. And one of the things that I pointed out to them at the time is, it's no wonder that people that are forced to undergo these kinds of processes come out with mental health problems, because, you're forcing us to undertake processes, and if we don't undertake it, then our rights are abused, and so you're making us abuse our own rights. Yeah. And that is some schizophrenia-inducing behaviour. And I say that not in an ableist way. I'm really genuine insofar as it's triggering. It triggers deep-seated trauma about us being caught up in a system for many generations now that we feel we have no power in. And that kind of trauma can wind up with deep-seated paranoia about systems and about authority. And you have that happen again and again and again and again all the time, not just this year, but every year, and not just this generation, but every generation. It changes the way that you behave, and it changes the way you see the world. It will change your language, and it will change how you speak to your children. It will change how you view your children's world and how they view their world when you raise them that way. And that's how trauma gets passed on between the generations. And so, I've just been thinking about that experience the last couple of days and going, it's easy for us to make mental health jokes, and I don't agree with mental health jokes, but it's also kind of genuine to say that there's some mental health issues tied up in this, when people, and the same with middle class people who have had the same, we have the same thing happening over in the United States with Trump and Mark and them. But you get suppressed and oppressed for however many generations. you're going to have some issues determining what's real to what's not real. You're going to have some issues determining, whether people are genuinely after you or not. And so I do think that there are some mental health issues in play. I'm not a psychiatrist. I just know what mental, going by some of the strict definitions of some of our mental health, and knowing that trauma can lead to mental health issues and problems determining what's real and what's not real.
Yeah, I saw a huge example of trauma being weaponized by these people who were spreading these mistruths like yesterday, and it was two young Māori men, about my age, who I know from forever. I've known them forever, and they'd come across that bit of legislation, or I'm not sure what bill it was part of, but it was talking about being able to remove a child from a home to test the child for COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And that's being shared around, and they were so angry, and I understood their anger, but they've been given this one bit of information without additional context. We could have another conversation about what a heavy-handed approach does and whether that's necessary or not. But just like that, they saw that sentence and it struck fear and trauma in them. Yeah. And they're real fucking mad, and they just need to see that, and that automatically turned down this direction that can be really destructive and dangerous.
Yeah, hard out. And because that again, it's triggering, because we've had children ripped out of our arms now for however long by the state. So one, it makes it really believable for us, and two, it puts us in this immediate space of fear, a real extreme response, and so and it's deeply rooted in our history as well, and so those sorts of things will definitely trigger our whānau and make it more difficult to, because in a way, you need to be able to objectively look at a piece of legislation, look at a bill, take it apart, look at a piece of media or whatever it is, take it apart and critically analyze the information. What is this thing actually saying in front of us? Let's take the emotional language away and have a look at what this thing, and it's really hard to do that when you're having your emotions triggered because you have deep-seated trauma in relation to that particular issue. And taking children out of homes is one of those issues, especially.
I think
also the government, refusing to take responsibility. It's you can't underfund the education system and the welfare system and all these systems that make a society function, and then we're why have people got these strange ideas? It's because if you think like that example you're saying, Todd, I mean, in the past that might have been those people discovering radical left politics and actually having a really positive effect on their life, but because people don't have that access to education that they potentially could have or once did, it's just kind of you go online and it's just, like you say, that rabbit hole of fucking sanity.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I don't know if you all saw it. I think it was early this week, but Billy TK was at a I don't know, event. I think it was in Whangarei, and he was speaking, and he was next to is it a Tino Rangatira Tanga flag, the red and black?
Yeah.
And he finished his speech or his talk by saying, "Make New Zealand great again." And it was just this really stark picture, because I was like, well, what part of New Zealand history is he talking about? Because I don't think he's talking pre-colonization, because then his MAGA fans aren't going to like that. They're already worried about him being Māori separatist. I've seen people talking about that, like the white people into New Zealand Public Party. And then it's also post-colonization, which era was great for Māori, and what exactly is he referring to?
Yeah, I've got some real issues with the way in which some of our mana motuhake symbols are being used in relation to that movement as well. And so I'm almost more inclined to deal with the likes of the New Conservatives, who are at least open about their white supremacy.
Yeah.
Because you know what you're dealing with then. But when
Yeah.
people are using things, you know, our mana motuhake symbols like the Tino Rangatiratanga flag and like the whakaputanga, he whakaputanga flag, which is one of our original, very potent symbols of self-determination. And then I know that they're now starting to call upon the 28th Battalion, you know, the symbols of the 28th Battalion and our grandfathers and great-grandfathers that went to fight in the Second World War and saying, you know, oh, they didn't fight for this. No, what they many of them fought were Nazis. They were fighting white supremacy. And so if you are going to allow yourselves to be associated with rhetoric out of white supremacist corners, and you're going to allow yourselves to be associated with neo-Nazi organizers and white supremacist leaders and Aotearoa, what are you doing citing and referencing the 28th Battalion who were dedicated to overthrowing that and keeping that out of New Zealand? Let alone our mana motuhake self-determination symbols as well. Like, so I find that really deeply disturbing in the same way that I find Brian Tamaki deeply disturbing, the overlay that they have that this is somehow about Māoridom and about, you know, Māori rights.
It's quite clever from a cynical point of view though, isn't it? Because it's sort of like, it kind of makes you second guess when you're questioning it. Like I saw someone that I know who's into that party, who's Māori, and they were saying, oh, people questioning me, or you Pākehā, you just don't understand, you know, and was using that language of, you know, like and it was, you know, like I was making, and even before I had arguing with them, I did second guess myself. Do you know what I mean? So in that cynical kind of way, it is quite clever. I wonder how much he's aware of that though, is how much he's just grabbing symbols.
I think
he doesn't seem. Do you reckon he's smart?
I think he knows exactly what he's doing.
I think he knows what he's doing.
You reckon? That.
Yeah, I think he's quite calculated in what he's doing, and the more that I've observed, and I've met Billy before as well. I signed him into the UN. One time because he came to the UN to meet with Helen Clark of all people, and hadn't sorted his security clearance. So I needed to sign him in so that he could get in to meet with Helen Clark. And we've spoken some after that as well. But you know, I mean, he's not a silly person. I wouldn't say he's not intelligent at all. And I think he's quite calculated in what he's doing. But what I find quite interesting also is that, you know, what I've known of him and when I met him, he was actually very conservative. And there's this way of talking about Māori development that doesn't, it's not just from him either. There's like an ilk within Māoridom of people who talk about success and development and self-determination essentially through capitalist success, capitalism. And that was generally his take on it when I knew him. And I think that's still his take on it now, which is, you know, quite counterintuitive to a lot of the takes that he has on it is quite counterintuitive to people who are immersed in self-determination and our sovereignty movement. Understand that there are big issues and big holes in that take of self-determination and tino rangatiratanga. It doesn't come out of capitalist models. And those two things generally wind up clashing anyway.
Yeah. Well, because
it doesn't really weigh out.
Capitalism's prime individualism, which doesn't involve the concept of community, right? Which is where
tino rangatiratanga is literally all about the community.
Yeah,
it's about there's no individual tino rangatiratanga. There's only the well-being of your community, and if your community is well, then you're on the pathway to tino rangatiratanga. It's the ability to be able to ranga your tira, which is, gather your community and look after them. And so, capitalism is, poses some issues anyway. And then I guess the other part of it is that, he tells a story about how he came to be aware of these things. And it was during the first lockdown, whilst he had time to sit down and look at stuff over the internet.
Go on
so
YouTube.
he didn't build his basis upon engaging with tino rangatiratanga movements. He didn't build it upon showing up to events or Waitangi Day, or engaging with leaders in that space. He didn't build it from, learning the way that many of us have learned through being a part of the movement and engaging with the movement. He learned it from Facebook. He built his basis of how he feels about these things from social media and being in lockdown a few months ago. And there are people who have been involved in these movements for decades, decades. So, again, I just, I'm still at a little bit of a loss as to why that, I guess it's just, that's how people, how a good portion of people now base their appeal is on social media.
I think it's timing too, though, right? With COVID and everything that's happening. I mean, people are looking for something. And I think that whole, not just with his movement, but the whole movement, this whole QAnon kind of thing globally, it's really wrapped up in capitalism, right? Because what they want is not a complete restructuring of society. They just kind of want this type of society that probably didn't even really ever exist, but going back to it, you know what I mean? This kind of, my friend who's really into this shit, he's always just like, I just don't want, what did he say one time? He's like, I'm trying to remember, I'm paraphrasing, but it was kind of something like, I don't want change, I just want things to be like they were, and it's just kind of like, I think there's that element to it.
Make New Zealand great again. Todd just talked about, same with the Make America Great Again. What they want to do is they want to undo progress. So it's the progress that we've made. For instance, with the way in which our leaders that have taken part in the United Nations have been heavily criticised by the New Zealand Public Party and Billy TK and whatnot. And that's because, from like the 1970s, 1980s, you had people like Ngāne Korman-Hinnick going to the United Nations and holding them to account and saying, I am my own sovereign leader. I am my own sovereign voice. New Zealand government doesn't speak for me. They're illegitimate, and from my perspective, they're illegitimate, and I will be the voice for my people here. And then and through numbers of Indigenous peoples, and this goes all the way back to 1923, Wiremu Rātana went to the United Nations to say, we will represent ourselves in this place as a nation, as our own nation. Our colonial government will not speak for us. And he was shut out. And then after him came Arnold Reedy. And then after him, after them, there were numbers of different people. That's just from Māoridom. And you had Indigenous people also. And so after decades and decades of lobbying and beating down the door, we finally got to carve out our space where we can have our voice and tell our truth, so that the governments aren't just going there all the time going, we treat our Indigenous people great, for us. And so they would like to undo all of that progress and go back to a space where marginalized voices, and this is, people, working class, poor people, disabled people, women, Indigenous people, communities of colour, who have taken decades to carve out their rights and their voice in that space. They want to undo all that. And they want to go back to the place where it was all old white men who controlled the narrative and so controlled the power and controlled the resources.
Yeah, because that's the progress you're talking about, right? Is societal issues, equality, and that's why this shit stems out from the right and the far right, because that's who it serves. Is we don't like just so many issues that I don't know, like what did Dave say last week? Oh, there's too many genders, and women don't need equal pay, and cops are fine.
He was playing devil's advocate, should point out, when he said
yeah. No, sorry.
We had David Farrier on here last week, and he was talking about his run-ins with all the various QAnon people.
But yeah, like police are fine. The murdering of black, indigenous people of color is just sweet. Like that's the back to normal they're actually talking about.
Yeah, and so people who are on the far left and left, and I'm an advocate for constitutional reform, treaty-centered constitutional reform. I think we do need to sit down and talk about how power is wielded in this country, and a more representative model, and something that's more aligned to the treaty, and centered on the treaty as well. And people who are on the far left, whether they want constitutional reform or whatnot, they do want, the system to be brought down and reconfigured. And so, it's to different ends that people want the same thing. They want the system to be reconfigured. And so insofar as this group can utilize others to destabilize the system, they're fine to do that. They know very well what it is that they're doing, and they're fine. And they also understand very well that where marginalized groups do it, and in particular, Māori, Pacific Islander, or black or coloured communities or whatever do it, that our bodies will be on the line when that happens as well. And so we're expendable. And so it works well to have us put our bodies on the line to destabilize the system, because that's what they want. And then they can step in when the time is right for them to step in to make the changes that they want to make. And I'm really conscious that on the sidelines of this, while we're all focusing on the NZPP, you do have the New Conservative Party with some extreme right, fundamentalist right-wing people involved who also want to destabilise centrist government, but with some very, disturbing agendas at play for what they want to see happen after that.
Yeah, well, there's a kid running for New Conservatives who, there was a scandal a while ago, or he appeared in a photo. I don't know who the figure was. I just saw this on Twitter the other day. But the kid had a MAGA hat on in the photo and was pulling the white supremacist hand
Well,
signal.
he was Young National, wasn't he, at that point?
Perhaps. But yeah, he's running for New Conservative now. And so that's what they're okay with. And that's public facing. So that's just what you see. They're okay with that out in public. So you can only imagine behind closed doors what they really think. Because you don't, I truly believe that if they're willing to be seen that way out in public, then it's way more sinister behind closed doors. And I believe Public Party was trying to coalesce with New Conservatives at one point. I think you alluded to it before too. There's that National Front guy, Kyle Chapman. Mm-hmm. Do you know his involvement with these events that he's organising?
All I know is that, New Zealand Public Party and Advance Party held an event earlier this month at Parliament. Was a protest, and Sue Gray, who's with the New Zealand Outdoors Party, was thanking Kyle Chapman for organising it. Really? And was thanking him for inviting her to be on the speakers list. And so insofar as, at the very least, and he responded, "You're welcome," essentially. And so insofar as he had control of the speakers list for the day, he certainly helped to organise that. And New Conservatives are very present there. They spoke there. And, there are secondary kind of, other connections. So, I don't know if you would have seen, but Lee Williams, who has some association with the Christchurch mosque attack groups, the groups involved with the Christchurch mosque attack, and he runs Cross the Rubicon, a blog that also is very pro-Trump and essentially white supremacist. And so he has, in his vlog, one of his vlogs, is talking about how Billy called him for a meeting to talk about how they could work together. And he is not very complimentary towards Billy, but my question is, why are you reaching out to these people? If you're interested in tino rangatiratanga, why are you reaching out to these people who would do us harm?
Well, Kyle Chapman firebombed a marae, right?
Kyle Chapman ran New Zealand's largest neo-Nazi organisation for 10 years and started numerous skinheads and neo-Nazi subgroups, some of whom patrolled, some of his skinhead groups patrolled the streets of Christchurch, terrorising and violently abusing people of colour and Asians and Pacific Islanders and Polynesian whānau. So, and he's still active in relation to white pride events, and he was also at that event wearing a New Conservative shirt, and so I'm guessing he's in with the New Conservative Party.
It's pretty scary, because you think like this election Labour's probably going to win, right? But then what about the next election cycle? And you look at how far like Judith Collins is to the right, it's not out of question that she could get into bed with these kind of people in the future.
Well, you're already seeing Jerry Brownlee parroting some of those theories as well, and so
they're fucking psychopath.
Well, that's the thing. These people they're actually like completely unscrupulous. They have no scruples and no morality because they will it is all about power, and they will like cling to anything. They're just looking for strategies and tactics that will get them into power. It doesn't like whether it's harmful, whether it means anything, doesn't fucking matter to them. Just whatever will work is what they're going to employ. And like, I know, like, I don't expect much from the National Party, but even this has been surprising the last few months. And it's like out of desperation, I believe largely because they're very lost at the moment and in disarray. But holy fuck, it's terrifying that there's the other major party is employing these tactics, like MAGA tactics. And I think going back to the point of like, these theories and mistruths and the shit people are getting sucked in by can appear kind of funny and trivial sometimes, but when you draw those ties to where it comes from, and we're talking about white supremacists in New Zealand, like I've witnessed white supremacist violence and rhetoric and the way they group together when I was young. It was really prevalent where I grew up, and it's not a fucking joke. And like they want to actually hurt people, and all this stuff, all the QAnon, it all goes back to these places where far right, alt right, white supremacist people gathered on the internet, and this is where it all stems from. And people like, I know reasonable people, like caring people who were like into this shit, and I'm just like, but you refuse to draw those ties that binds all this shit together. It's really frustrating.
And intelligent people as well. And so because like I said before, because they are able to build from truths, and this is a part of what our government and media and science and academia need to answer to, is that what has been your role in the truths that have been able to be used as the foundation upon which they can build their theories and place their rabbit hole logic, and place a whole lot of us at risk as well. And you're absolutely right. A lot of it stems back to those white supremacist groups and corners of the internet, but they've just become much more sophisticated. Kyle Chapman hasn't seen the light. He's just become more sophisticated, just the same over in the States. And no doubt, the strategy that they have now is also something that they acquired from the States, where groups like the NRA and the far right fundamentalists, they understand that the less public you are, the more power you have. And you can be actually quite powerful if you can work in the shadows and try to control a lot of people, because it keeps them guessing, and it creates all of those kinds of, you can create all of these lies around the abstract and the darkness and all of that kind of stuff. You can do that if you're not out there and in the public. And so Kyle Chapman is taking a back seat right now and working in the background. But, we can still capture him in these little things. We've seen him at those events. We've seen people thanking him for organising those things, so that we know that he's still present. And you can see little bits that he's, for instance, some of the marches that he's organised. So we know that he's still present. But yeah, there's definitely, for instance, the KKK never went away. KKK is still out there, but they just have become more sophisticated. They've become corporatized. They've figured out how to achieve their agenda in different ways.
Yeah, join the police force, right?
Yeah.
I think heaps of them originally were in the police force anyhow, but yeah, infiltrating the halls of power, right? You look at guys like Bannon and Roger Stone.
Absolutely. Steve Bannon's a perfect example.
Yeah.
And it's a way of legitimizing yourself as well, when you shift away from having a public extremist profile, and you put on a suit and you shift into working in a consultant or advisory capacity instead, and you're able to get your hands on the levers of power much more easily in that space as well. And so that's my observation at the moment, especially in relation to Kyle Chapman and white supremacy in New Zealand, is that they are moving towards being less visible and more institutional.
I think another thing that's really scary about it as well is because I work with, do some youth work here with rangatahi, and the amount of them that just, because apparently on TikTok, I'm not on there because I'm old, but apparently on there it's really prevalent. And one of the kids that we work with who's super smart, she's incredible, but she was posting that Save the Children shit, and I hit her up and was like, hey, look, that's nonsense, and sent her some stuff, and she's like, oh my God, I didn't realize everyone's sharing it, so I just thought it must be true. And it's, it's just, and it's so hard to push back against it, because it's so,
it's a guilt trap for young people, because you get prompted to share hashtag Save the Children, and who doesn't want to save the children? Everyone, but what's behind that is way more sinister and is actually harmful to children. So
yeah, and this one kid, she's so smart that I could just send her proper articles and she'd read them and get it. But some of the other kids aren't in that position, because they have learning disabilities or whatever. So it's it's tricky to sort of explain it.
And it's perverse, Donald Trump has actual charges outstanding against him. And investigations. FBI is investigating him for, sexual assault against minors.
Yeah.
And he is an actual associate of Jeffrey Epstein, and
there's video of them hanging out, being good pals, like.
Yeah, exactly. And so QAnon, they, you know, who their whole the whole rhetoric of QAnon is that Donald Trump is here to clean out the swamp and he's the great savior, and that there's this, you know, elitist cabal which is associated with a pedophile ring of powerful people. Yeah, there are pedophile rings of powerful people out there, and Donald Trump is very clearly associating with them and attached to it.
Yeah, well, a big part of their thing is like the Clinton Foundation being a part of this pedophilia ring. Donald Trump donated to the Clinton Foundation like several times, and he was good friends with the Clintons. All of a sudden, he's here to bring them down. Like, it makes no sense.
But that's the other thing is that, and we talked about this last week with David, but there's so many actual conspiracies, like you say, like the whole thing around Jeffrey Epstein. Like, I just understand why if you're going to ruin your life getting into some kind of crazy theory, you just don't do something like that's only, you know what I mean? That's actually based in some kind of fact.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel the same way, you know, in relation to these tino rangatiratanga issues, which is like, you know, we got actual stuff, you know, we've got actual oil companies trying to take land off people. You've got actual overseas companies who have documented human rights and environmental rights abuses being allowed into the country to trade through the Overseas Investment Office, and we're trying to challenge that, and we're trying to fight off the oil industry and support our whānau in Taranaki and down south. In relation to those, there are actual issues at play, and there are actual tino rangatiratanga movements, and there are movements for constitutional reform as well, long-standing ones. There's the Matike Mai movement that's in place at the moment, and then there's, before that, you know, there were others as well. And so, you know, there are movements that you can get involved in if this is what you're really interested in. There are movements that you can get involved in. But, you know, it was kind of similar to some of the other issues when I was working in conservation. Is I don't know how many people wanted to jump up and down about our stand in relation to pest control in the East Coast, and our stand was we will be the ones to make the decisions about what tools work for our area, and if that's 1080, then it's 1080, and if that's cyanide, then it's cyanide, and if it's trapping and hunting, then it's trapping and hunting. But we will be the ones to make the decision for what that looks like. And there are all these people that just jumped up and down about that, but not one of them ever showed up to help us with the trapping, to help us with the planting trees, to help us with the we're using cyanide or whatever it is that we needed to do. We're like, where are all you passionate people? So there's like, I'm quite sure a whole lot of it is really online stuff.
Yeah.
And that a lot of them aren't actually interested in being in a real movement where you have to freaking drive in the middle of the night to go to all these meetings and lobby people and not get much sleep, and bloody get on a boat and travel in the middle of the night in cold weather, stormy seas to head something off out at sea. You know, all of that kind of stuff that takes work.
Yeah, well, I suggested last week that that's the possible antithesis to a lot of this, or a good challenge to put to people who are proposing that they care about these issues, is like, okay, well, this is a real way of, affecting action and feeling empowered and connecting to community as well. So if someone actually took you up on an offer of like doing something of that nature, whatever the particular issue it is they're concerned about, because there'll be something happening that is kind of the crux of what so if you're saying, like if say someone's Save the Children, pedophilia, it's like, there's volunteering you can do with vulnerable children. There's work to be done that's actually tangible or means something. So I think it's a positive antithesis to these things. And I mean, like I had some involvement with Doc at my last youth working job in Taranaki, and because I don't know much about conservation and preservation of wildlife and 1080 and all that shit. And I went and met those people, and I was like, and did some trapping with them and releasing like some birds into the bush and shit like that. And I learned a lot, but I also learned that like, these people working at DFC that are trying to do the right thing, they're not like evil, nasty people.
Yeah. No, I mean, here's the thing, you know, similar to this COVID thing, DOC also have to answer for the reason why there's a general mistrust as well. Like they have not treated communities particularly well in the past. They need to really consider what their role is in creating a culture of mistrust where they have abused their own crown privilege and have also been, you know, a lot DOC conservation land is essentially, the vast majority of it is land that was alienated from Māori through legislative means. And so you know, there are some areas that have been gifted by Māori, but a whole lot of it has been alienated from out of Māori hands through legislative alienation processes. And so, and then they've gone about managing it in a way that is really patronising and does not recognise their treaty responsibilities, and have contributed to people, you know, iwi and hapu being dissociated from their kaitiakitanga, from their taonga, from their the legacy of their ancestors and their forest estates. And again, you know, it's just that same thing where that happens over and over and over again, or it's a multi-generational experience, and people aren't going to trust you. And you're asking them to trust you when you say, I'm going to drop this substance in the middle of the bush at the headwaters of your waterways in a place where you can't get to, but I can because we got all the money. And you're asking them to trust you. There's no historical basis for that trust. And so they need to really consider how they have managed their relationships in the past and how that might inform how they manage their relationships in the future if they want to start building that trust to get the social license to make the decisions that they want to make.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
It might be really, really optimistic, but does this current climate present an opportunity for, because like a really strong argument is being presented to us that perhaps the breeding of this mistrust amongst people between the institutions that stand, so government, media as well, and then like you're discussing DOC, Oranga Tamariki at the moment is a huge one. I think, you know, there's a really strong argument to be made that communities should be empowered to look after their own communities, their whenua, all these things. And at this time, it seems more obvious than perhaps it has before to a lot of people.
It has. And then, you know, even with this government, the whole be kind, we need to be kind, the politics of kindness and all of that. But a whole lot of that, what I notice from this government, is about telling other people that they have to be kind, telling other communities that they have to be kind to each other. There's not a whole lot of reflection on the kindness that they should be showing towards other groups. And so, you know, if community cohesion, and I do believe community cohesion matters, then there's a whole lot of self-reflection that needs to happen around, you know, what's your role in this government? How do you work with us in a way that's also kind and contributes towards community cohesion as well? You can't just have, you know, Chris Hipkins wagging his finger at people, telling them to be better and to do better. You know, there's stuff that they need to be doing as well to respond to that. I sound like I'm beating a dead horse on this issue, but you know, it's true. It's just that whole thing about being kind and encouraging cohesion that's a two-way street. And so I just want to know, when is that going to kick in for you guys as well?
Well, I
And
think they're
Ihu Mātau and Oranga Tamariki are two classic examples of that.
hard out. And I think that they're just co-opting that language, right?
Yeah.
That language of kindness in the same way that the Public Party are co-opting various things, you know what I mean? They're just, it's really cynical.
I'm loath to bring this up again, but I have to now. But I think it was early last week, Todd Muller did his fucking fluff piece TV interview about his mental health battle. And like, fuck man, supposed lefties on Twitter, I was drunk, obviously, but they're tweeting it and they're like, this is so brave and courageous and this is really positive for the country. I was like, people I know from my community who struggle with their mental health because of the conditions they live in, because of governments like Todd Muller's government, when they have a mental health crisis, or if they suck at their job because their job sucks, they lose their job, they commit suicide, they go to jail, they don't go on TV. And Todd Muller going on TV talking about his mental health doesn't matter a fucking iota to anyone I care about. That's not going to inspire anyone I know to be like, oh man, I really ought to talk to someone about my mental health. And there's just all this patronizing bullshit on Twitter of people being like, like trying to besmirch anyone who didn't care about Todd Muller's mental health journey. I don't give a fuck about his mental health.
I mean, I guess the thing with Todd Muller's mental health breakdown is, baby, come on. Sorry.
Are we going to meet someone?
My daughter's woken up. But the thing with Todd Muller's mental health episode is that a lot of that it happened through a really intense situation. Haramai, darling. Haramai ki toki taha. Come on. You can do it. Haramai. Come on. Hang up.
Yeah, you're good. Do what you need to do.
Oh! So, it happens through him being involved in a toxic situation. You're right, my girl. Pirangi koe te nohi I raro nei. Okay, kei te pai. You hop from the couch. Yeah, a lot of that happened through toxic work culture.
Yeah.
He sat at he sat at a place of incredibly concentrated toxic power amongst toxic people. And that's what's going to happen. You wind up becoming he wound up in a very toxified place, and he became toxified himself, mentally toxified himself, and was unwell.
Yeah, for sure.
So, if you really want to get better, he needs to leave that women toxic party. There's a whole lot of unwellness all around him. I don't doubt that he had a mental health episode, but
sure.
But he's participating within a party that perpetuates mental health unwellness for huge swathes of the New Zealand population.
Hard.
Really, nasty legislation and policy that would result in mental health and physical health issues for huge swathes of the New Zealand population. A very toxic and, as you pointed out before, Todd, nasty rhetoric, and it was a snake pit, and they turned on each other at the same time as he was having to deal with a whole lot of other things as well. And so I just think it was really indicative of the toxic place that he still chooses now to engage in.
Yeah, well, he gets $180,000 a year to stay there, or whatever.
And he gets paid very well to do it, and to do it in a way that results in mental unwellness for a whole lot of New Zealanders.
Yeah, I've been in jail several times a long time ago, but I guess that's the reason I get real mad about this, because the percentage of the prison population who are dealing with like serious mental health problems is incredible, and watching people struggle to hold on to their sanity in that place that just exacerbates it is heartbreaking. And so I just really can't spare any sympathy for the bro Todd.
Oh, and the mental health, the mental health issues that are that have their genesis in state care, in the state care to prison pipeline, people who are taken out of homes by the government through policies, and the national policies are terrible in that sense, in terms of the children who were taken out of homes and then abused under state care, and the mental health issues that were associated with that. And it is difficult to. I have. I don't wish mental unwellness on anybody. Of course, I don't wish mental unwellness on anybody. But it's difficult to help someone who won't help themselves. And I don't think he helps himself when he remains in a toxic party that is dedicated to perpetuating disparities that result in mental unwellness. Yeah. It's got to be bad for your wairua. It's got to be bad for his wairua.
Yeah.
You're way more diplomatic than Todd.
Yeah. Far better than I've ever expressed that, but absolutely.
I don't blame anybody for. I don't blame even. I don't blame people for being pissed about it.
Yeah, no. But that kindness and respectability politics where people are chastising you if you don't care. It's like, sorry, okay.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I just think it's completely reasonable. You just go, why would I don't want to say I don't feel bad for you, but then you help yourself and stop creating that situation for other people as well. And then I'll be more invested in your wellness, because you'll be more invested in your wellness, and you'll be more invested in the wellness of others.
Imagine he lost his job and had to go try and get a food grant or something.
That could be a great reality television show. Todd Muller down at the fucking Winds office.
He'd be in for quite a shock.
Hard out.
You have to prove you're going through a mental health crisis before we can give you this $50 meal ticket.
Yeah, and they're all. You have a look at all of the houses that they own. Like, they're all doing very, very well for themselves as well. Particularly these groups. Also, when you consider a lot of the groups where it's the irony. If we're going to come back to QAnon and the alt-right and the groups that are perpetuating a lot of the issues, a lot of the problems. A lot of them are actually doing very, very well for themselves, but they like to, or they're fine with utilising the lower class, middle class, socio-economically challenged whānau, those who are disaffected, those who are disenfranchised. It's kind of like throwing them in front of the bus, us in front of the bus. In order to achieve their ends. But they're actually doing quite well. They're doing all right for themselves.
Yeah, well, essentially what Billy is doing is the exact same thing Brian is doing, in terms of like they're taking donations and making money off this, and all the people spinning this stuff really hard are making money off it. There's clear motivation there in front of you. Like, it's very nasty.
Oh, Billy loves money. I'll say he loves money. I mean, if you look through his YouTube, you'll see. I mean, he's ultimately a capitalist, but also, and he sees tino rangatiratanga self-determination coming through an economic space. And kāti tēnā, wait please. But he also. He chases trade deals. Around the world. And works in that sphere. So
there's a lot of unflattering Facebook threads with people from the music community in Aotearoa.
Yeah, and he doesn't pay his bills. He
rips lots of people off.
There's heaps of it. Should we let you do some parenting? It looks like
I think she's actually all crashed out now anyway.
Okay, sweet.
You're all
Um,
good.
it looks
Goodbye.
very, very peaceful. Oh, one thing I did want to ask you about was that Rata tool, was that your initiative?
Yeah, I mean, I've come through, there's a whole lot of stuff that I've been thinking about in relation to the information superhighway, the way in which social media and the internet has opened up pathways to information, some of it not great. A lot of it's more like fast food, McDonald's equivalent of information.
Yeah.
And, traditionally, um, your ascendancy through information, through learning greater levels and enlightenment, was a process that was really, it was stepped out, it was mindful, and it was supported. You had people around you that supported you through a wānanga process. And so I've been thinking about how can we apply some of those tools to help us step out the way that we process information and the way that we always used to. Um,
Yeah. So,
and some of those tools, that said, those tools are also accessible when you go through institutions of higher learning. Yeah, for better or for worse. But there are things to do with when you're involved in research, and I am involved in research, and there are things that make information high quality, valuable information. So it's
yeah.
stuff to do with, was it discovered what was it not discovered? Was it published recently? Is it relevant to the topic? Is what this person is suggesting and the study that they're citing, is it accurate to what that study originally said, or are they misrepresenting what that study said? Are there other people who have cited that study? Has it come through other groups as well that are reputable, and also have, are there consequences around that person if they are found to be saying something that's not true as well? And so there's a few different tools that you can utilize to kind of slow that process down. And
Yeah.
I'm really interested in slowing that process down, how we look at information. There's a whole lot of people that just press click and share and
Yeah.
really don't bother.
Yeah.
I think we all do it sometimes. The best place to access that tool, because I thought it was really incisive, is, can people find that on your Facebook, or is there a better place to access
Yeah, I
that?
just did a Facebook Live because a lot of, some whānau were asking me, what are the things that you do? So I just did a quick, and I was thinking about it, I guess, oh, well, we like acronyms. So it was really, honestly, a 5-minute thing where I just came up with the acronym to say, oh, yep, rata. It's
Yeah.
reputable, accurate, timely, and
Accountability.
accountable. And
Yeah.
accountable. Yeah, and so those are just 4 tools. There's lots more tools, and nor are those 4 tools foolproof. But it was just, it's better than nothing,
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, I would encourage people to go follow Tina on Facebook. And where can people? Where's the best place to read what you're writing at the moment?
Well, I've got a Patreon page. So you can check me out on Patreon. A lot of the stuff that I put out publicly through Patreon. I also have a WordPress site, which is tinangata.com. And then, you can find me on Twitter. A lot of the stuff that I produce, I'll wind up linking through to my Twitter and stuff like that as well. So my Patreon and WordPress are linked up to each other. So either of those.
If you want to send us the links, we can share them through this.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd encourage listeners, particularly people who are struggling to engage in a meaningful and constructive way with people, to read what Tina's writing and saying. And did you see Laura O'Connell Rapira's article? What was her one?
Yeah, I actually, so I have on my Patreon page, one of my open publications on that page is I've started to collect resources I've got a collection of resources, including podcasts, websites. David Farrier's work is on there that helps us to, some tools for how you talk with whānau about it.
Yeah.
But, I've had whānau contacting me talking about their relationships, their marriages on the rocks. I've had whānau contacting me saying, I need to move out of home with my baby because my mum's now down the rabbit hole and I don't want to go down it with her. And so she thinks I'm a part of the problem. She won't wear a mask in public and she's not isolating. They're in Auckland. And so I feel like I need to take my baby and move out, but we can't find anywhere to move to. Like, people are freaking, it's really impacting on relationships and people's sense of safety.
Yeah.
So I have a page that has a whole lot of tools for how we can talk with whānau, and help us to understand the anatomy of a conspiracy theory or rabbit hole logic, how it works, and at what point to try and disengage, and places you can go to for help.
Yeah, amazing.
That's awesome.
So good. Well,
cool.
we're gonna sign up, and
we can use some of our Patreon money at last.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we could mutually sign up to each other's Patreon then. We don't.
And it's, yeah, we all come out looking better, but where no one's any broker.
Right.
I want to thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks,
Tina.
Heaps. That was amazing.
Really, really appreciate it. Really pertinent and insightful. Oh, sorry, baby. Yeah. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, guys. Thanks very much. Thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
All right.
Get you later.
Pomaria.